An ordinary American family decides to leave the city for a few days to spend some time together. Amanda and Clay, along with their children, get into the car and head to a rented cabin. While the kids swim in the pool and Clay explores the house, Amanda goes into town to buy groceries. On the way back, she notices a man loading his entire car with bottles of drinking water. The stranger seems odd to her, but she doesn't give it much thought. Once they've settled into the house, the family decides to go to the local beach. While everyone is busy with their own activities, the youngest daughter, Rose, notices an oil tanker in the ocean. She watches the ship closely and soon realizes that it's heading straight toward them. Clay is convinced the tanker will change course and won't come ashore. However, his expectations are not met. The ship crashes directly onto the beach. In a panic, the family rushes back to the rental house, learning along the way that similar incidents have occurred recently, as if the ship's navigation systems have failed. Before dinner, Amanda sees a few deer in the yard. Their presence seems cute to her, and she doesn't think much of it. Soon, the children go to bed and the couple decides to relax with a glass of wine. Suddenly, unexpected guests appear at their door. A black man introduces himself as George. It turns out he is the owner of the house. However, due to recent events, he was forced to come there with his daughter for the night. The thing is, cell service has gone out in the city and the power is down, which means the elevator isn't working. After his surgery, he is unable to climb up to his apartment on the 14th floor. At first, Amanda doesn't understand what the strangers want, but after a while, she realizes their intention and firmly refuses. The thought of having strangers in the house makes her uncomfortable. She doesn't want to let them stay the night. George offers to return part of the money the couple paid to rent the house, but even that isn't enough to change Amanda's mind. The situation becomes tense, prompting Clay to talk to his wife. After listening to her concerns, he suggests they speak with the homeowners again. He decides that if George comes off as dishonest or suspicious, they'll refuse to let his family stay the night. Meanwhile, a state of emergency is declared on the news. This pushes Clay to allow the guests to stay, despite Amanda being strongly opposed to the idea. George and his daughter Ruth head to the basement of the house, which they had set up earlier, so as not to intrude on the new tenants. The next morning, Amanda notices a notification on her phone about cyberattacks. However, when she tries to show it to her husband, all the news mysteriously disappears. Trying to make sense of the situation, Clay heads into town to look for someone who can explain what's going on, while Amanda stays at the house with the kids. She tells George about the vanished notifications, but he assumes it's probably the work of minor hackers. He mentions that similar incidents have happened before, but the situation eventually returned to normal. Meanwhile, Clay is unable to reach the town, as neither his phone nor his GPS is working. He is forced to wander, searching for any road signs or markers. Eventually, he encounters a Spanish-speaking woman who seems terrified and desperately pleads for help. At first, he tries to understand what she's saying, but realizing he doesn't speak Spanish, he decides to drive away. Moments later, he spots a large drone in the sky dropping red-colored objects. He quickly turns the car around and heads back home. It's later revealed that the drone was releasing leaflets, but the text on them is not in English. Soon the characters learn that the message on the leaflet says, "Death to America." Meanwhile, due to the internet outage, Rose is unable to watch the final episode of Friends. She's deeply upset, thinking she may never know how the story ends. Soon after, she notices dozens of deer in the front yard and asks her brother to go with her into the woods. Archie agrees, and the two head off to track the animals. Deep in the forest, they find a small cabin with windows overlooking the neighbor's mansion. Meanwhile, George decides to visit the neighbors, hoping to find some useful information. Just in case, he takes a weapon with him. He enters the house and finds broken windows and scattered belongings. After a while, he comes across a satellite phone. To his surprise, it doesn't work either, just like mobile phones, suggesting the satellites are down as well. George surveys the area and makes his way to the beach, where a plane had recently crashed, with passengers' bodies scattered across the sand. Then he looks up and sees another airliner speeding toward him. He immediately starts running to escape yet another crash. After returning home, the man shares his suspicions with Amanda. He is a financier, and due to the nature of his work, he's trained to notice even the slightest fluctuations in numbers and data. He reveals that he recently had a strong sense that something terrible was coming, though he couldn't pinpoint exactly what, so he brought Ruth here with him. He believes the country is undergoing a massive cyber attack and that things are going to get much worse in the near future. Suddenly, their conversation is interrupted by an incredibly loud noise, forcing everyone to cover their ears in an attempt to block it out. Amanda heads into the forest, where she soon finds Archie and Rose. At that moment, she suddenly remembers the man she saw in the parking lot outside the store. Based on her description, George suspects it may have been his neighbor Danny, someone who has been obsessed with survivalism for years and has been extensively preparing for any kind of emergency. Worried that the threat to the country might be real, the family decides to leave and head to their relative's place. However, this would require them to pass through the city. George tries to talk them out of it, but Ruth asks him to let them go. She believes they'll be better off on their own. As the family drives toward the city center, they soon notice a massive traffic jam. Getting closer, Amanda steps out of the car to ask other drivers what's going on and why no one is moving. To her surprise, there's no one behind the wheels. It turns out that many Tesla vehicles operating on autopilot are driving the same route. One by one, they keep crashing into the cars ahead, creating a growing pileup. Realizing the situation won't resolve itself, Amanda quickly returns to the car. At that moment, she sees another Tesla heading straight toward them. She jumps into the driver's seat, maneuvers through the incoming vehicles, and after a difficult drive, manages to get the family safely back to George's house. The characters sit down at the table and try to figure out what to do next. Amanda and George share their thoughts on the unfolding events. George reveals that he had one very high-profile client, so rich and influential that almost everyone in the country would recognize his name. However, George chooses not to reveal it. A day before everything started, that client called him unexpectedly and asked to transfer all his funds to a different account. That was the moment George realized something unusual was happening in the world. At the end of the call, the client added a cryptic phrase, "Take care of yourself." Frightened that this man might know more than the average American, George decided to leave the city and hide out in his country house. Amanda begins to realize that the situation is truly critical. In an attempt to relax, she joins George in the living room to dance for a while. During their dance, George tells her about his wife, who was supposed to be on a flight at the time all the disasters began. Most likely, she didn't survive, but he refuses to think about it. The next morning, they discover that Rose is missing, and Archie's teeth have started falling out. Soon after, he begins uncontrollably vomiting. The boy admits that the day before, he was bitten by a tick in the forest. George recognizes the symptoms of Lyme disease. Understanding that it's impossible to reach a hospital due to blocked roads, he suggests they visit the neighbor who has spent most of his life preparing for doomsday. Clay takes Archie, and together with George, they set off to find the reclusive Danny. Meanwhile, Amanda and Ruth are searching for Rose. They arrive at the cabin in the woods and start arguing, but immediately fall silent when they notice strange movement outside. Amanda steps out the door, but sees no one. Soon she spots bicycle tracks on the ground, likely left by Rose when she rode off from the house. She decides to follow them, and turns to call Ruth, but suddenly sees something unsettling. The girl is surrounded on all sides by a herd of deer. The animals show no fear of humans and keep coming closer. Ruth is terrified and doesn't know what to do. As the leader of the herd approaches her, Amanda suddenly appears. Amanda starts waving her arms and making as much noise as possible to scare the animals away. After a while, her plan works and the deer flee into the forest. But then the characters witness something horrifying, nuclear explosions occurring in the nearby city. Meanwhile, the men reach Danny's house and try to persuade him to give them medicine for Lyme disease. Despite the circumstances, the neighbor refuses to help and points a weapon at them, demanding that the uninvited guests leave. Clay manages to convince Danny, and they take the medicine and drive away. In the car, George shares a story from a friend who worked at the Department of Defense. This friend once told him about a similar scenario. According to him, the goal of what's happening is likely the overthrow of the government, and it unfolds in 3 stages. First, people lose electricity, along with it, mobile service, the internet, and all familiar means of communication. Then comes the second stage, psychological warfare, which manifests through constant sonic attacks that have now become frequent. As a result, chaos erupts, and according to the planners, people will eventually bring about the third stage themselves, a civil war. Meanwhile, Rose arrives at the very mansion she and her brother had spotted from the forest cabin. The girl goes down to the basement, which the neighbors had converted into a bunker. There, she finds a collection of movies and discovers a disc containing the final season of Friends, which she finally gets to finish watching. And that's where the film ends. Thanks for watching. See you next time.